Well, this morning when we heard from Jonas, we read of three men and their followers who basically had a complaint with God's representative, Moses. We had Dathan and Abram, Abram accused Moses of seeking only to lord over the assembly and never coming through on his promises. Well, Moses never won the position in the first place. God brought him there. Moses had no desire just to lord over the Israelites. And also, the main reason why he hadn't come through on his promises, it wasn't because Moses hadn't tried. It was because God was actually doing the leading, and they were following God's plan. But also along every step of the way, it was the people who were rebelling against God's plan. So Moses had nothing to do with it. But that's what Dathan and Abiram were accusing Moses of. Then there's Korah. Korah was accusing Moses and Aaron of trying to keep the better positions in the community for themselves. Korah himself was a Levite, just like Moses and Aaron. And his family had the privilege of carrying the most sacred elements whenever the camp moved. Yes, they had the privilege of carrying the Ark of God. What a privilege. But that wasn't good enough for Korah. He wanted to be a priest. If not, maybe even high priest, to replace Aaron. Maybe even the one who spoke to God, like Moses. But yet he tried to cover it up. We're all priests. We're all holy. So step down. Well, these three men made their complaints known and sought a way to have their way by convincing tribal leaders to follow their leading. Yet these complaints, like I said, were unfounded. Moses didn't want the position, but God led him there. The people were the ones who were keeping him away. And God was the one who chose the Levites, and specifically Aaron's family. But these three got up on their soapbox right before Moses and Aaron and said, "This is what has to be done." But when they set those soapboxes up to raise their complaint, they put those soapboxes on hollow ground. Not hallowed ground like Moses was when he by the burning bush. Take off your sandals, for this is hallowed ground. No, this is hollow ground. They stood, made their complaint known, and before long that ground swallowed them. There was no stability in their complaint, and they were going against Almighty. And they were swallowed up. They were sinning from the get-go. They were grumbling, complaining, and being overall critical about God and what God was doing through Moses and the people. Yes, Korah made his accusation against Moses, but it was God who put Moses in that position. It was God who was leading. So Korah was barking up the wrong tree when he was complaining. It isn't Moses you have to complain with, it's with God. Not only were they barking up the wrong tree, but they were engaging in a very harmful activity. Moses declared this earlier in Exodus 16:8, when the people complained about not having food to eat. Moses responded that they were grumbling not against him, but against the Lord. The early church also had to deal with this whole issue of complaining. As we read this morning with the kids, Paul wrote in Philippians 2:14, "Do everything without grumbling and arguing." And in 1 Corinthians 10:10, Paul writes again, "Do not grumble as some of them did and were killed by the destroying angel," referring back to Exodus. But then also James picks it up. In James 4, it talks about, why is there warring among you? Isn't it because you have your desires which are being unmet? These are not spiritual desires, but your carnal natures. And because they're being unmet, you are killing one another. Maybe not physically, but by destroying each other with your words. 5:9, James, he speaks it again. Do not complain, brother, against one another, so that you yourselves may not be judged. Behold, the judge is standing right at the door. Now, aren't you glad we're not a church of complainers? I mean, we're perfect. Everything's going right. We don't complain. We might critique a little. We might share our opinion on a matter. But we never complain. How rude to do even that thing, complain. This is, no, not copacetic. Well, I'm afraid to break the news to you. And even to myself. Because even this morning, it's like, I'm like preaching on complaining, and throughout the morning, I found myself, I have to get out of bed. I have to do this. I was complaining about how many things I'm going to preach about complaining. The one good thing is, I'm pretty sure that no one will be complaining about my sermon today. But we do complain. And let me just run through a few examples of how us as Christians might complain. And as I read through them, ponder whether you have even uttered anything similar. Have you ever complained when a Christian friend or acquaintance invites your friends over to do something, but fail to invite you? Why did they invite them and not me? I thought I was a good friend too. Oh, have you ever complained when a Christian friend or acquaintance buys or gives your friend something, but doesn't do so for you? They've gone on a trip, brought back gifts, but they left you out. Have you ever complained when a Christian friend or acquaintance gives a nicer gift to your friends? They all got $20 shirts. You got a $5 bracelet. Do you complain when you do nice things for a Christian friend or acquaintance, but they never or rarely do anything nice for you? Do you complain about the food a Christian serves because you expected either maybe more of the food or better food? Before you get too far on that one, remember the Israelites in the desert in Exodus. All we get to eat is manna? Okay, they got quail coming out their nose. Do you complain against a Christian when he or she doesn't pay as much or any attention to you as you desire? Do you grumble because other people were given the same recognition, reward, or compliments as you, even though you worked harder and longer? That one sounds familiar. How about Matthew 20? The parable of the generous landowner. Promise the first group, I'll give you a denarius for the day. Next group, a couple hours later, I'll give you pay. Next group, either one group only works 1 hour. They all got the same pay. Does that sound familiar? Do you ever grumble about the assignments or tasks that God, through His spiritual leaders, gives you, even though they seem tremendously overwhelming for you, but for which God has promised or enabled you to do through Him? Have you ever grumbled about doing some of the commands that God has given all Christians? Not that one. We don't grumble about doing what God commands. We are upholders of truth and righteousness. How about the command in 1 Thessalonians 5? Encourage one another and build each other up. That's easy. But you're supposed to do it for that person over there. Ooh, I want to do these people, but not that person. It doesn't say encourage those who you like. Those who you are good, close friends with. No, encourage one another. And he doesn't give a time frame. Only on days you feel good. How about another one? Humble yourselves and be like-minded. This one digs in a little bit. None of us like to humble ourselves. We like to think well of ourselves and promote ourselves, but humble ourselves. How about the command, have confidence in your leaders and submit to their authority? Yes, have confidence in me, okay? That's way too many laughs. How about be subject to your governing authorities? That's a little more harder to swallow. And now I'm going to go deep. Go and make disciples of all the nations. We're in the process of this sow the seed program. We know we're called to do it, but I'll do that tomorrow. I don't feel like it today. Or that's only for the experts. No. God gave a command for all of us, but we find reasons, excuses, complaints not to do it. If we're all honest with ourselves and God, we have all complained in these areas and many others repeatedly. But why isn't complaining a sin? Complaining is a sin simply because it puts ourselves in the wrong positions. It's supposed to be, we submit to God and uplift Him up. And then we go to our friends and our fellow humans and encourage and uplift them. With complaining, we go, God, you don't know what's going on. We do. We're now in command. You step down. And our friends and our acquaintances, they've got it wrong too. So we're putting you down too. Instead of lifting up God and lifting up people, we're putting everybody down. God included. That is why it's a sin. But that raises a question in our minds. If we're not supposed to complain, can Christians even express their own opinions? Isn't that what we're doing anyway? Well, if Christians can't complain, does God simply want us to live in misery? Well, let us start with the last question about the misery. God wants you to have joy. He promised it through Christ. I want you to have joy and be made complete and be in abundance. To experience that joy sometimes, though, we'll have to go through hard times. Because there's greater joy on the other side. But God knows what's best. We don't. We can't even see tomorrow. We can't even see the next 5 seconds. So why are we complaining? He knows what's going on. And we know He's good. But what about this whole issue about not being able to express our own opinions? First, we must know the difference between complaining and giving opinions. And this morning you will see an insert front and back, which is dealing with a bunch of notes for this morning's. You don't have to worry, your arm will fill in the blank, so I can't hear a complaint about that. I'm going too fast. But it's on one side is a bunch of definitions, and on the other side is dealing with complaining. On the definition side, we start off with, we need to know that complaining is because of what is within us. It is a critical spirit. A critical spirit has come to reside. And a critical spirit is described as one who has a negative attitude of the heart that seeks to condemn, tear down, and destroy with words. How do we get this critical spirit? Well, it is usually fostered and nurtured when pride enters into our hearts and finds that things aren't going the way we want it to be. Pride says, I'm focused, I'm most important. And if things aren't going my way, I'm going to destroy everything that gets in my way. A complaining person is a person with a critical spirit. But a person with a critical spirit doesn't have to be a complainer. There are at least 3 other ways that critical spirit, and I will briefly hit upon those, but we will focus mostly on the complainer. The first, though, is you can come across, that critical spirit can come across as a gossiper. Well, I know no one here is a gossiper. Let me give you a definition anyway. A gossip is anyone who reveals secrets and goes about as a talebearer or a scandalmonger. This person has privileged information and proceeds to reveal that information to others with sinful motives, without the other person's knowledge or approval. This was the definition that was given to me. I only have one question about that, and that is, it says with sinful motives. I do believe that is true when it is a gossiper with a critical spirit. But there's also the gossiper without the critical spirit, and that's just negligence. Passing information which is supposed to be secretive, but spilled by accident. Not intending harm. It's not intending to destroy. It's still a sin, because we are to be watchful of our words. But it's not coming from that critical spirit. So you have two different types of gossipers. A second way, outside of the gossiper, is the critical spirit can manifest itself as one who is a slanderer. While the gossip is one who is behind the scenes, the slanderer is basically in your face. He makes false statements to damage another's reputation. He has no care about the truth of the matter or even helping a brother correct an error in their lives. He's just going to destroy you. The third type that allows the critical spirit to thrive is one with an attitude of judgmentalism. This person has an excessive critical point of view, which is characterized by a tendency to judge harshly. This person lacks any empathy of another's viewpoint because they believe their point of view is the right point of view. These are the ones who will look down, ignore, or dismiss any who are not in agreement with them. Though we are not here this morning to talk about the gossip, we're not here to talk about the slanderer or the judgmental spirit. However, I encourage you, look at those areas of your lives and turn them over to God if you find them there. If not, if you don't find them, praise God. But this morning we are here to talk about the good old situation of complaining. Complaining, and I've lost my pages. I'm complaining. The complainer is one who is habitually negative about others and the circumstances of life. One who is habitually negative about others and the circumstances of life. They are characterized by discontentment and ingratitude. Some key words in this definition are discontent, ingratitude, negativity, and habitually. The discontent and ingratitude show where the person's heart is. This person feels robbed and is missing the view and realization of all the blessings that they already do possess. They are looking on the negative instead of the positive. This definition also shows that the comments are not positive. I don't know how anyone can be a complainer and only going about speaking positive words. But they throw the word negative in there, I guess, just for clarification. But if you're speaking only positive words, you're not a complainer. More importantly, a complainer is one who is described as habitually complaining. One who never seems to stop. This could be about the same subject matter over and over, and they harp on it. Or it could be they just go from one negative issue to another negative issue. They just always feel like they have to point out the wrong. Why everything's bad. Why they're just so grumbled up, or whatever his name was, with our kid's story. But always in that negative. With that word habitually in there, it reminds us that we can complain if we have the right. We'll discuss how we can do that in just a minute. But it's when we stay in that negativity where we mess up. But so how can a complainer express himself? Well, that is simple. I mean, he complains, right? It's in his name. However, he can do so in many different ways. We can see, yes, he can complain. Basically, letting the world know what he's complaining about. This is what's wrong. That grass is too green, the sky is too blue, it's too cold, it's too hot. Everyone's taller than me, everyone's shorter than me. What's the deal? But then you have the murmurer. He's also a complainer. The only difference is he isn't so vocal. He will do it in a low tone. Maybe just enough within earshot of one person or two, so they know he's complaining. But he isn't going to make it public, but at least the person who he's talking to, he's upset. Then you have the grumbler. I have a tendency to follow this one. You go even lower in your voice. It's they hear the negativity in your grumble. You may not have the clear, distinct words, but people can pick up on it. You're still complaining. You may not putting it in words. It may just be grunts, but you're still complaining. But before we discuss how we can deal with these, let's discuss at least 3 ways that we can utter complaints, but they are not derived from that critical spirit and not a sin. The first one is lament. A lot of times when you hear lament, you think, oh, woe is me, all right, and you're thinking of crying. Lament is how we can complain to God. When you have something going on and you just feel the world is against you or things are not going right, take it to God. Let Him be the recipient of your complaints. He wants to hear from you. He wants to know what's going on. Yes, He already knows, but He wants you to express it to Him. Share that with Him. If you don't know how, let me point you to a very clear and distinct definition. Remember, we're talking about lament. So go to the book of Lamentations. Great book on lamenting to God. Just telling all the hurt. The problem is we got to make sure we stay in our lament that we are complaining and taking it to God and not blaming God. Once you start blaming God, you go back to that critical spirit because you're trying to denounce God and put yourself on the throne. And you're back to complaining. Stay out of complaining. Go to the lament. Let God know. And so He, not only tell Him what your complaints are, but humble yourself and say, Lord, show me how to get through this. How I can work through this to change it. Or, if I'm not to change it, how I can walk through it. The second one is critiquing. Because that's all that we do as Christians. We're great critiquers. We're not complainers, we're critiquers. A critique is different than a complaint in the sense that you have an agreed upon standard. We have a bunch of you who have gone through 4-H. When you've taken your craft to the fair, there is a set standard of what qualifications would make a blue ribbon, a white, and a red. They don't just go, well, that one, I feel, it looks horrible, but I believe it deserves a blue. No, you have a standard. And if you agree upon it, you're just letting, okay, here's what the standard says. How do we measure up? For the church, that's easy. Here is our standard. This is our standard. Now, if we redid the women's restroom, the floor there, and the activity center. Nowhere in here does it say whether to use vinyl, plank, or wood for the floor. There's nowhere scriptural. We all have our preferences. Those are opinions. They're not agreed upon standards. So we can't say, well, I think it should be this. I think it should be that. You can express those, but Make sure that you're not judgmental. And now we'll get to our opinions. But opinions have no standard. It's just sharing your opinions. The critique, like I said, has one. And it doesn't have to always be the Bible. Because when we're out in the world, we won't be able to take the Bible into our workplace and say, well, this is what the Bible says I should do about answering the phone today. First of all, Moses didn't have a phone. But we go into our workplace using the laws of the land and the policies of the workplace. And as long as we are following that, because that is an agreed upon criteria, we are doing. If we find our business going askew, we have the right to critique it. Let them know what the problem is. We don't cast judgment. We just let them know what the problem is. Back to opinion, like I said, we all have that, but we all have opinions. We can express those, but as long as we don't put our opinion as superior, ours is the right way, we're fine. But once we start putting that judgmental, we get back to that critical spirit. So now that we know what it means to complainer, and we know that we're doing it, how can we change? And that you'll see on the back side of your bulletin insert. And I will quickly go over this. First, you got to figure out if you are a complainer or critiquing or lamenting. By that, know what your purpose is. Why are you doing this? Are you doing this so your voice can be heard, your problem can be solved your way? Why? What's the purpose? And who are you bringing in the complaint to? Are you bringing it to the right people, or are you merely letting your complaint known to everybody who comes across your path? Then you become a gossiper. Are you accusing or blaming, or are you seeking for help? If you're accusing and blaming, you're being very critical. You're trying to put someone else in the wrong. But if you're seeking help, look, I have a problem. I'm not critiquing. I'm just saying I'm struggling. I need your help. Could you pray with me? Could you give me advice? We're building one another up. And again, last one, are you habitually finding items to complain about? Are you dwelling on it? Are you going back to that complaint being in the negative? Well, if you are, you're complaining. But then we go from there. What can you do to overcome the complaining spirit? And I got a whole list here for you. First of all, take your frustrations to God. Let Him know. If you're going to need to cry out to anyone, cry out to Him. Amen. He is the one who has the answers. He's the one who can give you support. He can see you through. Go to Him. Don't take it to Rodney. Rodney, Rob, both of you. Either one of them. But you can go to Rodney, Rob, Keith, and anyone here. Ask them to pray with you. I am struggling. I got this negative spirit on me. Could you help me with it? Could you give me advice to get out of the situation? How about dwelling on the positives? Philippians 4:8 even encourages us to think on these things. Are holy and pure. So much more. If you think on the positives, you have less space in your mind for the negatives. You will see life in a whole different way. Well, before we go on, one other thing. Oh, no, that is the correct one. Give thanks to God in all your prayers. In that verse in Philippians 4:6, it talks about take your thanks to God, but do so with thanksgiving. Ooh, that makes it hard to complain. Because we're saying, I want you to do this, but thank you, God. Thank you, God. You've got to find a positive to give God to give thanks. And it will change your attitude, because it will change you from that negative outlook to the positive. And you need to be learned to content in all things. Another hard one. Lord, teach me to be content. This is a situation where you got me in, you got so for a reason. Pray, if all possible, to get you out and through. But Lord, if this is where you want me, help me to realize that this is where you want me. And it's there for a reason, for a purpose, for your greater glory, and to make me a better child. Be content. Then, I'm not trying to catch up with WWJD, but EFOJ. Keeping our eyes fixed on Jesus. Let Him be our focal point, not ourselves. If we're focusing on ourselves, we will always find a complaint. I'd gladly share it with everyone. But if our eyes are fixed upon Jesus, we will find less to complain about, because we're too busy trying to be like Him. We also need to seek to be renewed daily with the Spirit within us, because we can't do this on our own. We need the Spirit in us, praying daily, Lord, help me to be better. Help me not to complain. Help me to see the positive, not the negative. And replace returning evil for evil by giving a blessing instead, loving one another. If I go to the youth group and Mally throws a ball in my face,
Good job, Mally.
accidentally, I shouldn't throw it right back at her.
I would have just thrown it right back.
I should just let her know that she's loved. She's forgiven.
Huh?
And help her improve her aim next time.
No, it's just not to me.
Or she can teach me how to catch better one or two. But the idea of not returning for evil, but always looking out for the other, loving them, helping them, and edifying and not tearing others down. If you're seeing a person struggle, come alongside them. First, encouraging them. You're doing great in your walk. But if you are going to help them, let them know the truth too. But coach it in loving words. Saying, look, you're doing great. I see some areas where you might be struggling. Could you tell me what's going on? And maybe I got it wrong. I want to know. I want to be there for you. If not, you're doing great, fine. We'll walk together, arm in arm. If you're struggling, I'm still walking arm in arm with you, because I want to build you up. And give grace to others as Christ gave to you. It's so easy to condemn. But remember, the judge is on the other side of that door. You too will be condemned. For everything which you levy at someone else, God will measure back to you. Be less judgmental. That's God's job. Yes, He may have made us kings and queens in His kingdom, but He still holds the position of judge. If you're going to need to lament to God, do so. Let Him